The conveyancing process, and in particular buying and selling a house, is when you transfer the legal ownership of a property to another person's name. Every transaction can be completely different. However, there are certain stages that we will always go through in the conveyancing process. The process usually starts with the seller's solicitor issuing the contract paperwork. The buyer's solicitor will then look through the contract paperwork and apply for searches. And at that time, the buyer will be applying for their mortgage, finalising their finances and commissioning a survey if they wish to. When the buyer's solicitor has received all of the information, they will then raise inquiries. The seller's solicitor will do their best with the seller to answer all of those inquiries, and hopefully when the buyer and the buyer's solicitor are satisfied with everything, they will then move to the point of exchange of contracts. And this is the most crucial part, and the transaction becomes legally binding on both the buyer and seller. A deposit is paid on exchange of contracts and a completion date is set. On completion, the buyer can pick up the keys and move into the property. On exchange of contracts, you usually pay a 10% deposit, so that's 10% of the purchase price. Sometimes a lesser deposit can be negotiated, usually as low as 5%, but that has to be agreed by all parties if you pay a smaller deposit. On exchange of contracts, when you pay the deposit, you are legally committed and it is a financial commitment to purchasing the property. So if the buyer decides after exchange of contracts that they don't wish to purchase the property, they would lose that deposit and the seller would get to keep it. I would say that this is one of the most commonly asked questions. It's what everybody wants to know when they first start buying or selling a house. Unfortunately, it's probably one of the most difficult questions to answer because there are so many different factors that can influence how long the conveyancing process will take. You can have delayed searches, the local authority can be busy, you can have an adverse survey, your mortgage offer can take longer than you expect, or it also depends how long the chain you have, so how many different properties there are in the chain that all need to complete on the same day, which may experience problems, so that could be one of the main reasons that the chain takes longer. Without wanting to be a politician, if you have to have an answer, sometimes we say between 8 to 12 weeks, but it could be quicker or it could take longer, unfortunately. So stamp duty is stamp duty land tax. It is a property tax that you pay. The buyer pays it on the purchase of a property and it is based on the purchase price that they're paying. There are different rates of tax payable depending on whether you are an individual or whether you're a company, whether you're purchasing a residential property, commercial or mixed use property. The different rates of tax for residential property are the standard rate, which a person would pay if they're purchasing a single dwelling or their own main residential property, or there is the higher rate of tax that people pay when they're purchasing a second home or additional dwellings. The current tax bands are 0%, so no tax is payable up to 250,000. Between 250,000 and 925,000 it is 5% tax. 925,000 to 1.5 million is 10%, and anything over 1.5 million is 12%. And if you are an additional rate or a higher rate taxpayer, you will pay 3% on each of those tax bands. So when you purchase a freehold property, you are purchasing the absolute ownership of that property. You purchase the land and all of the buildings and you buy it free from any restrictions, except obviously any laws such as planning and any covenants that may be on the title. When you purchase a leasehold property, it's almost a lesser title. It is granted out of the freehold by a deed called a lease. Sometimes people say that a lease is like a very long tenancy. and you are purchasing the right to occupy and use that property for a specified period of time. The lease will outline the terms and conditions and the rules and restrictions placed upon you during your ownership of that property. Also, with a leasehold property, you will have to pay ground rent. This is sometimes very minimal, and it does vary on the properties that you purchase. And you'll also have to pay service charge, which is a contribution towards repair, maintenance, and the building's insurance for the common parts and the freehold building.